So how did a story that wasn't even yet a story become such fodder for reports by what's commonly called the mainstream media, including, to be sure, even us here in News 4? We got drawn into this. We're joined now by Paul Levinson. He is a professor of media studies at Fordham University. He's also the author of a book called The New Media. So, Paul, let's talk about this. This is sort of an interesting case study, isn't it? In how things have changed, because in the past, we would never have even thought about doing a story based on rumors that somebody else was doing a story.
Well, it's a classic example of reporting about a report rather than reporting about an actual event.
But it was the internet that drove this, that made this happen. It had to happen then, right?
Well, absolutely. The first I heard about it, in fact, was on Twitter, where people started tweeting right before the Super Bowl that the New York Times was coming out with this story. It's a sad example of what happens when there's no gatekeeping or editorial control, because people can say whatever they want on Twitter. There was a link to a Washington Times blog, which is where the story first broke. But then, to make matters worse, the New York Post and, well, just about everyone began talking about the story. And it's really a sad day for journalism. For all I know, the story is true, but it's just not very good form to get all this information out there without any facts whatsoever.
But given the reality of where we are now, because we inevitably had to acknowledge at least that these things were going on, we've never trafficked in the rumors themselves on this channel, but we had to acknowledge the fact that this was becoming a big political firestorm. The fact that you do have the internet, the fact that when somebody is doing some digging, even if they don't find a story, they're doing digging, it generates questions, it generates traffic on the internet. Does the New York Times have a responsibility in this new age, under these new conditions, to either put up or shut up here?
Well, we don't know what the Times has, what they've done in the first place. For all we know, the reports of the New York Times report are wrong. It's hard to be sure what's going on. If you think about the National Enquirer and the John Edwards story, people were denying that left and right. Wikipedia took it off their page until it was shown to be a fact. So I think the best practice is basically talk about things that are really happening. Talk about the snowstorms. Talk about an ex-president going into the hospital. Take it easy on just a rumor and a report of a report.
What's your opinion on whether the mainstream media should jump in once it's out there in the stratosphere and people are talking about it and people have read all over the internet that the governor's about to step down? What's our responsibility to our viewers at that point?
Well, the mainstream media is already being upstaged by Twitter and YouTube and Facebook.
And do we just ignore it?
Well, you have to be careful nonetheless. Otherwise, you'll just become a secondary mirror of what the new media, as I call them, where any consumer can become a producer. Anyone is a journalist. There's a lot of good in that, by the way, because truth can come out, which otherwise might get filtered through the mainstream media and never be reported at all. But the flip side of that is that errors can be reported as well.
So Paul Levinson, thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate your wisdom.
You're welcome.